'Tis the season for bookish reading resolutions, and I'm here to help you learn how to read more in 2026. Hey, my name's Shelby. Welcome to Bookshelves. This is a cozy corner on the internet where we talk about all things reading, writing, and assorted bookish other. I'm so excited to be bringing this video to you during the admittedly tail end of the New Year's season, but I know that this is a time of year when lots of people are thinking about how they want to spend their time more intentionally, and that for many folks, reading or perhaps reading more is a part of that. And that was me not that long ago. I was a massive bookworm as a kid. I would say reader was my primary identity. And as I got older, starting probably in high school and certainly through college, I found that life was just way too busy for me to read. I stopped reading for myself and only read for class. I became kind of entirely unplugged from the world of fantasy, fiction, the joys of being swept away to another world. And I only really started reading again as an adult for the first time in 2020. Which sounds like a pandemic resolution, but I actually picked up reading a little bit before the world turned upside down. I set a New Year's resolution that I was going to read 24 books, 2 books a month. And I was doing that because I was in grad school. I was super stressed. I was living in a new city. I didn't have a lot of friends. And I wanted to build in time for myself each day when I was otherwise feeling a little overwhelmed with school and just like learning how to be an adult, cohabitating with my partner for the first time. Like there was so many things happening that were not about what I wanted. They were not about bringing me joy. And I decided, for an hour a day, I want to make sure that I'm doing something for me. And so I started reading before bed every night. Then the world turned upside down, and boy, was I glad that I'd started that habit. And really, ever since making that commitment, I've read more and more each year. Now, a full 5 years later, I'm somebody who reads about 40 to 45 books in a year, which to some on the internet is a tiny number of books. But for most people, especially folks who are not plugged into reading as a regular hobby or habit, is probably like an astronomical number. And I'm really content with my reading routine. I have found so much joy in returning to reading again. And I thought now is the perfect time to think about like what got me to the place I am today, so that anybody else who's looking to, reignite that love of reading in their own life and make room for reading again can benefit from that and maybe take on some of those same habits or approaches. So, all of that preamble out of the way, let's get into how to read more in 2026. The first step in reading more is getting curious. You have to understand by asking yourself, why am I not reading now? Is it something you just haven't given any intentional thought to? Are you stuck in a painfully slow read that's just like bringing you down? Do you not know what you like or where to go for reading recommendations? Do you not have time? Are you struggling to focus on what you're reading? Understanding what's in the way of having your ideal reading habit can help direct you towards the answer. The problem can be solved. You just have to know what the problem is. For me, and when I was getting started, I think in part I felt like I didn't have any time. And because I hadn't read for several years, I also didn't know what I liked anymore. And so when I got back into reading, I turned to some of the authors I loved as a young adult. And then I turned to the world of BookTube, which was super insightful and kind of takes me to our next tip. Once you've gotten curious and you know what's in the way of the reading habits you want, your next step is to get organized. I find it so helpful to have a place to dump all the reading recommendations that you accumulate as you re-enter the world of reading. Maybe track what you're reading so that you can learn what your reading habits look like, how quickly you tend to move through stories depending on what those stories are. And the way that I got organized was through a reading app. I use Storygraph, which is a Goodreads alternative. It's a woman-founded company, and it allows you to track books that people recommend to you and put them on a TBR, a to be read list. It allows you to track when you're reading a book, when you finish a book. You can leave a review, you can do buddy reads, you can set reading goals throughout the year. It's a platform that has helped me get and stay organized, which in turn helps me be motivated to read more. Similarly, especially if you're somebody in that camp of like, I don't even know what I like, having a place to track what you're reading and how you felt about it will help you start to learn your own taste. And getting recommendations is a great thing to turn to BookTube for. I found over time lots of creators who had similar taste to me who could basically just give me like a constant churn of reading recommendations, which made starting to read a little bit easier, because just that first step, because I always had a place to start. I always had options, because I had, curated a list of recommendations from readers who I trusted. So getting organized might look different to you, but for me, getting organized was curating a list of bookish content creators who had a similar taste to me and who could recommend me lots of books, and then setting up a reading tracker app. In my case, Storygraph, but there are lots of other platforms. Of course, there's Goodreads, Fable is a big one. And that was a place where I could keep track of all the books that I'd been recommended, keep track of what I was reading, set goals, and build that motivation. Once you've gotten curious and you've gotten organized, might I recommend that you get multimodal. I know, if you are new to reading or reading again, the thought of an audiobook might be super intimidating, but it has been absolutely life-changing for me to move away from exclusively reading physical copies of standard prose and incorporating into my reading routine audiobooks, graphic novels, poetry collections. There's just like a whole wide world of ways to consume stories, and many of these can address some of those primary barriers that are in the way of having the reading habits that we want. For example, if you are somebody who just feels so cramped for time, audiobooks can be a lifesaver. I started with audiobooks during my commute to work and during my chore time at home. And I was really intimidated by audiobooks. So I started by only reading nonfiction on audio. I found that a nonfiction audiobook was basically a podcast, and I was very well practiced in listening to podcasts. That was something I could focus on, that I didn't get overwhelmed by. And once I'd kind of built the muscle of audiobook listening, I really expanded. Now, as crazy as it is to say, I can listen to a brand new like fantasy or sci-fi series on audio as long as I have some amount of focus available to me. And that's something I couldn't have dreamed of doing when I started listening to audiobooks, but I found that as I listened to them, I built the muscle for focusing on that kind of content. And I also just got more comfortable with dipping my toes into certain genres and seeing, did I like that audiobook experience? Did I not? I learned about my preferences, how much a good narrator matters to me, for example, how much the speed of the audio setting matters to me. You can only learn what you like and don't like about audiobooks if you try them, and if you try them without judgment. I know some people on the internet are fans of saying that listening to audiobooks isn't reading, but we've been passing down stories orally since the beginning of time. And I say listening to a story is a great way to engage with a story. And it's one that you can always fit into a busy life. There's a wide world of audiobook platforms. I'll name the ones that I use. Of course, there is Libby, which is almost certainly your local library's platform for all digital content, both ebooks and audiobooks. It's a great tool. I'd be happy to give like a walkthrough if that's something people would be interested in. But I get many of my audiobooks by checking them out from the library for free and listening to them in my Libby app. I also am a subscriber to Everand. It used to be called Scribd, and Honestly, I'm a little bit more mixed on this because when I subscribed to this service, it was an open library of content and you could consume as much of it as you wanted. It was recently like purchased and consolidated and has kind of changed its structure. And now it's much more akin to a one-for-one credit system. So there are different levels of membership and you can unlock one book from their library or 3 books from their library, depending on your subscription level each month. That being said, it's still cheaper than buying physical books. I think the lowest monthly cost is like $11.99, and you have access to the books in perpetuity after you unlock them. So that's another great place to get audio books if you're up for paying. Audible, of course, is perhaps the most well-known platform, and many audiobooks are exclusively on Audible because Amazon has a lot of power in the market and can offer much better deals if you make your audiobook exclusive with them. That's a similar like credit system, or you can outright buy an audiobook. The credits are usually cheaper than buying the book outright is, but it's a recurring subscription. So if you're only up for maybe 1 or 2 months of subscription at a time, you do have to pay close attention to when you have that subscription on or off. Somewhere in between the free library and the paid services like Everand and Audible is something like Spotify. If you are already a Spotify premium user, so you are already paying Spotify, one of the things that you gain access to is their audiobook library. I think you get 15 hours of listening a month on audiobooks, which depending on your book is the length of a book, but there's no additional cost to those stories. So if you're already paying for Spotify, that's a really nice bonus and a place where you could consider the books free or built into that cost. Whereas platforms like Everand and Audible are exclusively for the purposes of audiobooks and they are paid platforms. So there's sort of a wide range, and I encourage you to explore what works best for you. Similarly, I had never read a graphic novel before I returned to reading as an adult, and I had a very strange perception of them, somewhere between thinking they were childish and thinking they were for dude bros that I was not one of, more like a traditional comic book. But graphic novels can be such a beautiful way of exploring story. It exposes you to a wide range of art in the same way that an animated TV show can perhaps depict things like magic if you're a fantasy lover in a way that, live action could never really do. Graphic novels have this incredible ability to bring stories to life in front of your eyes. And of course, they're much more accessible than long form prose. If you're somebody who feels cramped for time or you're struggling with focus, graphic novels are a great place to start because they're snappy, they're short, and they have multiple ways of engaging your brain. Not just with words, but also with all that beautiful art on the page. Lastly, thinking about the world of ebooks and e-readers can be overwhelming as well, but you don't need an e-reader to read and access ebooks. You can get ebooks delivered to your phone, to your tablet, to your computer, or to your Kindle, Kobo, Nook, your books, with an X, whatever else. And again, ebooks can be much more affordable or free entirely, and they have the added bonus of not taking up any physical space. So if one reason you find yourself resistant to reading is that you're like, where would I put these books that I acquire? Not everybody has the joy of a book nook in their home. Ebooks could be a good solution for you. And Libby is another great place to get started because you can get ebooks for free from your local library. Of course, there's a wide world of Kindle books, and most major booksellers, if you visit their websites, will have an ebook option that you can use instead. A book that might cost $27 new physical hardback might cost like $8 as an ebook. So they're more affordable if you want to own them, and they're very widely accessible if you want to rent and experiment. All right, we've gotten curious, we've gotten organized, we've gone multimodal. I would like to reiterate how important it is to get a library card as the next step. I've already talked a lot about the value of the library card. Your local library is a resource that you should treasure for a million reasons. And your local library probably has lots more resources available to you than just books. There are oftentimes like streaming subscriptions for TVs and movies. There's magazines. There's like local museum tickets oftentimes. Free or affordable printing. You know, the local library is your friend. Might I recommend you get to know them. But in addition to all of those great resources, getting a library card makes reading more affordable, and it also makes it lower stakes. As a kid, I always finished the books that I read, oftentimes because they were the book that was in front of me, that they had been gifted to me or that I'd spent my allowance on, and it felt really high stakes to put a book down because I already owned it and I'd invested in it. But when I returned to reading as an adult, one of the things I discovered was I was still hitting that point of resistance with putting a book down, even when I wasn't having a good time. I had this like compulsion to complete it anyway. And there's nothing worse than a book you are not getting along with that you can't bring yourself to put down, because that just puts you in a reading slump. So if you feel like the thing in the way of reading for you is this like tome that you've been reading for months and you're having a terrible time, but you feel like you have to get to the end of it, might I invite you to put it down? And one way to make putting it down, letting it go, DNFing it a little bit easier is by getting it from the library. Because it's not yours, it's a rental. Send it back early, make someone's day. There's just much less investment that goes into a library book for you, the person who would have otherwise purchased the book. And I have found that it makes it much easier for me to try new authors, to try new genres, and to be willing to walk away, all of which helps me pick up the pace because I find things that I love and I gobble them up. And when I find something that's not quite doing it for me, I can just say, okay, next. And that is great for reading pace. That really brings me to my last tip of this video, and that is get comfortable with walking away and with juggling. I already reiterated this, so I won't hammer it in more, but DNFing can be a good thing. Do not finish, did not finish-ing. For anyone not familiar. It allows us to move on from books that we are not getting joy from and engaging with books that we are getting joy from. And DNFing is not a permanent thing. Oftentimes, I will start a book and then realize I'm not in the right headspace, or it's not the right season, or I'm feeling too stressed and busy and this is just a big book that's adding to my sort of mental load. And I can put it down and come back to it later. It just helps me keep moving and making progress, having that sense of momentum without dragging on a commitment that I feel like I can't walk away from. And if we are being multimodal, especially, juggling can also make it much easier for you to make a lot of progress in reading because you can hop between books. As a kid, I never read more than one book at once, but now as an adult reader who is like cultivating my own reading practice, I have like 4 books going at all times, which might be aggressive. That might not be the answer for you. But what I enjoy about being open to juggling books at once is that I can always have the right book for the right moment in front of me. So if I have an audiobook going, I can listen to it when I'm doing chores, when I'm commuting, when I'm knitting, for example. And then I want a physical book when I'm going to bed. And I probably want that book to be either really engaging so that I can stay awake long enough to read some amount of it, or to be really easy reading, like lighthearted, nothing that's gonna give me nightmares before bed. And a graphic novel maybe is a great thing to have available there instead. Or maybe if you're the type of person who, there are periods of my life where if I pick up a book at bedtime to read, I immediately fall asleep. And when I notice that happening, I'll switch to a graphic novel in bed so that it's lighter, it's quicker, it's easier to get through, and I still feel like I'm making progress reading before bed, but I'm not asking myself to be immersed in like high epic fantasy with my two brain cells fighting for their lives at the end of the day. And perhaps I carve out time on a weekend where I can like cozy up and sit somewhere for like 2 hours and read that big, exciting, heavier duty book. By being willing to walk away when a book isn't working for me and to juggle multiple books throughout my week, I find that I am just always making progress, and very quickly the number of books I've read throughout the year starts to tick up, which there again gives me more motivation to keep going. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on how to read more in 2026. 5 things that will help you kind of get on the road to success. Get curious about what's not working for you now. Get organized so that you know what you want and where you're going. Get multimodal so that you have the right book for the right time, that you explore new ways of consuming story that work for you right now. Getting that library card makes reading affordable and accessible. And of course, getting comfortable with walking away or juggling so that you can make progress no matter what life throws your way. I hope those are helpful, and I would love to know in the comments down below if any of you have tips and tricks to encourage cultivating a stronger reading habit for each other in the new year. I'd also love to know any books that you think are super fast paced and essential starting places for somebody who's looking to kick off a new reading habit in 2026. I hope you will all stick around and subscribe so that we can keep talking all about books as the year progresses. Maybe I can even recommend some books that you might like in the new year. And I hope until we see each other again, you find an excellent book to read and that you actually enjoy reading it. See you all soon. Bye.